It's the Skeptic Show! With special guest star, Dean Ismay.
I'm off out for the weekend. Those Star Lost Choose Your Own Adventure videos that I do take about 3 times as long to edit as my normal videos, despite being about a third as long. But I said if I had time, I would answer some stuff from one of Dean Esmay's videos, because apparently there's a secret masochistic streak in me that I deny completely by being an overt sadist. But we shall see. So this is going to be a quick off-the-cuff thing. I've got some notes here, so I'm going to be looking away and checking that I'm talking about the right thing, but otherwise... Alright, let's bang this out nice and quick. So the whole set of recent arguments basically centres around the idea of evidence. I am constantly asking for evidence for people's religious claims, and they're constantly coming up short. But Dean and his cronies like to claim that they are presenting evidence, and that we're just denying that it's evidence. Okay, this will require some nuance, which Dean isn't very good at, but let's try. Evidence are facts and observations that suggest that a proposition is true. Okay, so let's say there was a footprint outside the window of your house. My proposition is that someone was peeking into my house last night. The footprint is evidence that someone was there, particularly if it's fresh or whatever. Okay, I then advance my proposition. Elmer was peering in my window last night. Well, the footprint's evidence that someone was there, but not evidence that it was Elmer. If we then examine the footprint, we find it's the same type of shoe that Elmer wears, that the indent is of someone of about Elmer's weight, and so on. If it has unique scratch marks that left impressions in the dirt that match Elmer's shoes, then that might be evidence that Elmer was there. So what constitutes evidence in relation to a particular claim is rather fluid. So you might claim that something is evidence for a proposition, but if we then examine that evidence and it comes up short, like the shoe doesn't match Elmer's, then that's not evidence towards that proposition. It may be evidence towards something else, or it may even be evidence against your proposition. So keeping all that in mind, in we go. Most of this is in response to a tedious discussion that Dean had on his channel. I will link it below. It was in the first half they were discussing evidence, but they never really produced any. But anyway, so this is a bit scattershot, but we'll go for it. Okay, so they have this meme thing up that they put now. That belief in the supernatural is normal, healthy, rational, and evidence-based. Is it normal? Most of the world believes in religion of some sort, so in that sense, it might be normal. But when a disease is at an epidemic level, we don't change the definition of healthy to describe it as being someone who is diseased. We just would say it's an epidemic. So we have an epidemic of religious thought, if you like, an epidemic of supernaturalism. Well, it doesn't mean it's normal. It certainly doesn't mean it's healthy. I think it's fairly trivial to show that belief in supernatural, belief in things without evidence, essentially, leads to bad outcomes, or tends to lead to bad outcomes. It's far from the only thing that leads to bad outcomes, but it's a pretty consistent one, and it detaches people from reality and excuses all sorts of horrendous behaviour that many people like to claim religion should stop, but doesn't. So there's that. Is it rational? Well, this kind of ties into the last thing they say, which is that it's evidence-based. There is no evidence, therefore it's not rational. A rational belief is a justified one that can be supported with evidence. So long as there is no evidence, it's not really very rational. Now, it may have been more rational in the past when information and knowledge was more limited and one had to make do with the information that one had, but even then I don't think it was, because there was no evidence for it. It's just there was a complete paucity of other options. But that doesn't mean you should have gone for a bad option. So that's that. Right at the start of the discussion, Dean or his guest, I can't remember which one, said that these supernatural claims cannot be proven scientifically. So, I mean, really, we're done right there, because science operates on evidence and logic and reason. And so if you're admitting that you can't prove something scientifically, you're admitting that there is no evidence, no logic, no reason behind what you're claiming. So, I mean, okay, bye, done. That would be a bit of a cheat, and as much as I want to keep this video as short as possible, that doesn't really help us here. So, the actual arguments that they make. The fine-tuning argument. Well, this is essentially an argument from ignorance, argument from personal incredulity. I don't know how the qualities of the universe got to be what they are. I can't comprehend that it would be this way by anything other than our directing intelligence. Gigantic, illogical leap, therefore God. No. I mean, there's just so much we don't know. I mean, the parameters of the universe don't have to be as exact as people claim. Klaus goes on about this. Just go and watch him. I can't be bothered. Basically, this is just a repetition of an argument from ignorance, argument from personal incredulity. It's based entirely on unsound grounds. And if you're going to say that the universe was fine-tuned, specifically for human life or whatever else, then you're going to need evidence to back up that claim. The fact that the universe has particular values and so on is not evidence that it was controlled or fine-tuned or whatever else. It is what it is. The particular shape of any particular rock that you pick up is very particular, very exact. You can measure it and so on. It's still just a lumpy rock, though. It's been shaped by natural forces. It hasn't been designed to look like a rock. Same kind of thing. This is rather as if you imagine a puddle waking up one morning and thinking, this is an interesting world I find myself in, an interesting hole I find myself in. Fits me rather neatly, doesn't it? In fact, it fits me staggeringly well. Must have been made to have me in it. This is such a powerful idea that as the sun rises in the sky and the air heats up, and as gradually the puddle gets smaller and smaller, frantically hanging on to the notion that everything's going to be alright because this world was meant to have him in it, was built to have him in it, so the moment he disappears catches him rather by surprise. I think this may be something we need to be on the watch out for. Arguing that cosmology somehow provides evidence for God is not a good way to go about things either. We can look at the facts. Yes, planets are whirling around in not particularly precise orbits, elliptical, remember, and the universe is apparently ordered, but that's only on a human timescale. On a longer timescale, it's whooshing and crashing, and comets are slamming into planets, and planets are hurtling off into the void, and galaxies are smashing into each other, as we're going to do to Andromeda in a couple of billion years or whatever, if I remember. It's a whirling chaos in a temporary state of order, emergent order, because you just have essentially randomness being processed into rules. If you've ever played the game of life, the little mathematical game with the squares, and the squares either live, die, or stay or reproduce according to very simple rules. You can fill a game of life field with random dots and set the program going, and over generations it will slowly settle into a pattern and then become staid and solid, and after so many generations, it's completely ordered. When you enter random noise into a process, into a set of rules, that tends to be what you end up with, though of course in more complex structures like the universe, chaos theory throws things around at random anyway, and things are constantly in a state of entropy and decay, which they're not in the game of life. So it's an imperfect comparison, but you can see how emergent order arises, and emergent order is a theme across all of this stuff. So is that evidence for God? No, it is a fact that the universe appears to be ordered on a short-term basis, but how would this be evidence for God? You need evidence for that claim. You're saying God ordered the universe, so you need evidence. Otherwise, you're just making yet another argument from ignorance and personal incredulity. These are fallacies, and this is pretty much the answer to all of these things. Quantum physics. It seems that whenever anyone with any kind of woo comes under attack, they retreat into quantum, because quantum is weird, and they sprinkle whatever they're saying with a dose of quantum to make it sound more scientific. This is a big problem with Deepak Chopra and his kind of cronies, but it's increasingly been found in theism as well. And most of this centers around a complete misunderstanding of the observer effect and how it works. Anything that interferes with a quantum field can collapse it. It doesn't have to be a conscious observer. It's anything. So, an electron hits something else. It counts as an observer. So the universe is constantly observing itself, but not as a conscious entity. It's just constantly interacting and collapsing waveforms. So this doesn't help you either. Again, I'd refer you to Claus. This is his area of expertise. And to quote him, I think it doesn't work like that. Near-death experiences, covered those in a recent video, so go back and look for that. I believe it's called No NDEs Aren't Evidence for God. Okay, really short and quick. NDEs happen, that is a fact. Claiming that they happen because of God, that is a claim, and that is a claim that requires evidence. The evidence that we do have about NDEs is that it's down to oxygen starvation, DMT or similar chemicals released by the brain at point of death or under severe trauma. All of these kind of things. And also that it used to be culturally inculcated, which would suggest that either all gods exist, all heavens exist, and that whatever you believe is where you end up, or that none of them are right and it's just a hallucination that happens to be influenced by the culture in which you live and what you're expecting. So that seems like a more parsimonious explanation. If you want to claim God did it, you're going to need evidence God did it, and all the evidence that we have at the moment suggests brain trauma, chemicals, delirium, all those kind of things. The organisation, beauty and complexity of the world, do these imply anything? No, things can self-sort into organised collections or systems and so on as emergent complexity. Yet again, beauty is entirely subjective. What's beautiful to me is not going to be what's beautiful to a slug, for example, so that doesn't help you. Organisation and complexity, there are other ways to explain this. Emergent complexity. Evolution explains the complexity and diversity of life, and so on. So that doesn't help you. I mean, they refer to the watchmaker argument, but I mean that was refuted God knows how long ago. Life doesn't need someone to make it because of evolution. Now, that's the best. That's about the only place where Paley's watch would be applicable in the sheer complexity of life. But evolution blew that out of the water. The thing about talking about manufactured items is that they are different in character and presentation to life. And we know that life can construct itself. We know that even very simple mathematical forms can produce amazingly complex things, such as fractals. That doesn't help you either at all. Behe's idea of irreducible complexity is a good one that might be indicative of a genuine and actual design, and that tends to apply to human machinery, because there are things where a machine couldn't have evolved from an earlier machine. It's iterative, not evolutionary. So improvements and so on may happen gradually over time in devices, but it's in a different manner to the way it happens in evolution. The trouble is that thus far, Behe and his followers have not been able to find any examples of irreducible complexity in biology. Every one that they've tried to claim has been thoroughly debunked. Even if they did find an example of irreducible complexity, it would not constitute evidence for God, only that particular organism or whatever was designed and made. And we're getting to the point where humans will be able to do that. So we'll have proven that it can happen, but that we did it, which means that there are more possibilities than a deity. Aliens, God knows what else. An earlier precursor civilization of intelligent dinosaurs. Who the fuck knows? I'm just taking the piss, but it's to point out that even if we do find something designed in life, it won't mean that God did it. You'd need evidence for that claim. Dean and his guest like to say that they used to be atheists, but given a lot of the things that they mention, it's very hard to credit that claim at all. For example, the common mistake that creationists make by saying, "Oh, I can't believe this came about by random chance," or "evolution's random chance," or the odds of a cell coming together is like a tornado going through a junkyard and assembling a 767, which is just to not understand how any of these processes work, how evolution works, how it's evolutionary, how things change slowly over time and bit by bit is added on. It doesn't all happen in one random rush, that there is natural selection, and where there's selection, it's not random, and how the laws of gravity and so on inevitably lead to suns and planets and all the rest of it. It's just not random chance, it's just gravity when it comes to those, and that's it. They mentioned briefly the simulation hypothesis, which is apparently all the rage in Silicon Valley and so on at the moment, that given the potential future computing power of whatever else, then a virtually limitless number of simulated worlds and universes could be created, so that the sheer odds of this being a simulated universe as opposed to a genuine physical universe are fantastic. But this is still a claim that would need evidence, and we have no evidence for it, whereas the multiverse does now have some limited evidence for it in the cosmic microwave background radiation and a few other things. Nothing definitive yet, nothing to the point where I'd say that a multiverse is set in stone, it's a definite fact yet, but it does have some evidence, whereas a God creator has no evidence. I spend a bit of time complaining about materialism, but if you're going to claim that there's anything immaterial, you're going to need to show me that there's anything immaterial. Thought, ideas, all of these things, we extrapolate them from the physical world and we hold them as simulations, ideas in our brains. And they exist as electrochemical patterns in our brains. And they exist as relationships between items in the outside world. At no point is there anything immaterial there. Just not at all. If you want to claim there is, you're going to have to show me. I don't even know what spiritual life means, for a couple of reasons. I mean, spirit, immaterial, no evidence. Spiritual seems to be a kind of knapsack term into which people stuff anything that they happen to like. Art, spiritual. Music, spiritual. Religion, spiritual. Whatever the fuck else. There's just... It's essentially meaningless. It's a noise. You might as well say, "Oh, I'm not religious, I'm..." That would accomplish the same. This basically means nothing to me. Prime mover argument, I mean, we all know what's wrong with that at this point. Everything requires a cause, except God. Well, if everything requires a cause, then your God does. Kalam argument, no, except God. Well, then not everything requires a prime mover, and there can be other things. And, we've got evidence of uncaused causes now, so that just refutes itself and then collapses anyway. Complain about explain-awayers, like me here, explaining why these things aren't evidence. It's not that I'm explaining them away, it's that they're not evidence for what you're claiming that they're evidence for, and I'm demonstrating that. This is the point of scientific and rational inquiry. We pick away at ideas, and the ones that survive examination are the ones that seem to relate to the real world, whereas the ones that don't survive examination, like your theistic ideas, don't appear to relate to the real world. So that's just done with. It was particularly aggravating that they misused Occam's razor. Occam's razor is the idea that, given several solutions to a problem, several answers to a question, the simplest one is usually a pretty good one to go with. Path of least resistance and all that. It's not a hard and fast absolute rule, it's just a general sort of guideline. But they misused it by saying that, God is the simplest explanation, which it isn't. Because to invoke a supernatural being is to invoke something for which there's no evidence, that can suspend the laws of nature and everything else. God might appear to be a simple explanation, but it requires changing absolutely everything, and there is absolutely nothing to support it, this idea. So it is not simple. In fact, it actually massively complicates absolutely everything. So that's a misuse of Occam's razor. I think that's about it. Except to explain that I don't disbelieve these things, I don't discount these things because I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist because these things aren't evidence, because they don't back up the idea of a God at all. And a reminder, atheism is just, I don't believe in God. Here we're talking about science and logic and reason and following evidence. These things are not innate to atheism. Atheism is just the conclusion, I don't believe in God. That is it. If you want to talk about things that I do believe, you're going to have to ask me specifics. If you want to ask me about my various philosophical outlooks on life, materialism, rationalism, pragmatism, I try and combine Epicureanism and utilitarianism into my personal life philosophy. If you want to ask me about those, that's grand, that's great, but you're not asking about atheism. Atheism's just, I don't believe you, and that's it. I'm an atheist as a consequence of those things, and as a consequence of there being no evidence for God. That's why I'm an atheist. Zang!